What should you put into a Git commit message? Or if you're not using Git, maybe you're using a different version of form of version control. What kind of things do you need to put in those commit messages? And even more importantly, what should you never put in a Git commit message? Now, why are we even talking about Git? I mean, come on, this is version control. Isn't that kind of boring? The whole idea of being a pro coder and a software developer is to be writing the code, to crank out the stuff, to generate the activity. Isn't GitHub and whatnot kind of, I don't know, boring infrastructure stuff? Well, it can seem like that, but if you start thinking long range and don't think about what am I working on this week, but instead, what am I doing over the next 3 months, the next 6 months, a year, 2 years? A lot of times we spend as pro coders is we need to go back and look at what we built. We need to go back and read code. Sometimes it wasn't code written by us. It could have been written by somebody else. And at that point, you need to be able to look at a commit and say, well, here's the code, but what went on? What happened? What happened here so that I could understand it, so I can understand how to evolve it from this point forward. And so one of the first things you need to think about putting into a commit message is the first line needs to simply state what happened. Like, what does this change do? Okay. This change implemented new parser for Hibernate Query Language, or HQL. Just say implemented Antler-based parser for HQL. So one of the last features I implemented with Spring Data JPA this past year was to add that to it. So the first line, just a statement of what you did. That's all there is to it. Doesn't need to be very long. It needs to be concise and to the point. So when you're reading that 9 months from now, you get the point. Now, something else to then add to that is a little more detail or context in the subsequent paragraphs. You go into the thing, used Antler to implement HQL, EQL, JPQL query parser. This way we can make alterations to the queries. A little more elaboration if someone's going to delve in deeper. They may, if you're reading that or someone else is reading that, you may get the point of the subject line, or you may be like, well, I don't know. What are the immediate questions you can anticipate trying to remember? Is that what's a little more that I can add to that? So you want to put this additional context below the first line so you can add to that. And then something else that you really need to include is you want to, towards the bottom, ideally, is you put a link back to the ticket. So I said in the commit message, you want to put what happened, what you did, what was the point of it. What you don't need to put in there is all the back and forth, all of the war stories or the arguments. You don't need to put into the commit message, well, I argued with Jim Bob Joe and he had a different opinion and I decided that his input was invalid, so we didn't do that. That doesn't really serve you a year from now when you're trying to read the commit message. Now, if you include a link back to the ticket where all this was developed, that's really handy. So somebody can read that. Well, you implemented a parser. What was there a little more detail to that, or why did we go with Antler? I heard about Lex and Yak. What's the deal on that? There should be a link down at the bottom of the commit message. Oh, okay. Here's a link. I can go back to the issue and I can read the entire design conversation. Okay, if I go back and look at the ticket, I can see that there was a discussion between the committer and 2 other people. Okay, that's a question I was just wondering. I see that they answered that. So you're giving them a trail. You're building the record. So, in a sense, you want to look at, I keep using GitHub, but this applies to whatever version control system you're using. But in GitHub, you can, the tickets or the issues is where you can track the whole evolution, the design, the involvement. Initially it started with this idea, and then we got some feedback. So we elaborated on the idea, the planning for it. And then finally you get a little further down into it and you can see, I did a first round of implementation, but I got this feedback from one particular developer that was actually pretty good. So I made alterations and there's more changes. And then finally, I got approval and so I merged it. So somebody can read the full story if they want it, and they can find that if they're starting from the code base. Somebody at any point can be reading a particular file in your system. They can say, I want to know more about this. Let me go look at the commit history and look at the record. Okay, here's the latest update to this happened 6 months ago. Let me look at some of these changes. Oh, well, that's kind of interesting. Now, it may be they're reading it like an adventure story, or they're like, there needs to be some changes here. There needs to be some alterations, but they can go look up the public record. This is where you need to think of, people could come into this commit from a lot of different points of view, and you want to make it easy for them to get to the point and also give them the trail to continue down. Okay, well, I was thinking about making alterations to this. Now I can see where the changes happen. I can go read the issues and get a little bit of the backstory to understand how this works. I can have more context to inform me before I make more my changes to it. That's handy. Other people may spot, oh, there's a bug in the system. There's a bug on this line of code. When did this line of code come into being? Okay, I can use Git to look up the what's called the blame report, and it shows me who made this contribution. Okay, I can see this line. Here's this commit. This I can read the commit that introduced this. Oh, it looks like this was a solution for something else. I could then read the issue and understand, well, they were trying to solve this particular bug. Okay, I understand that, but it looks like they left out a corner case. So what I've stumbled upon is a corner case that was fixed in a previous commit. And now with all this context pulled in, coming in from a different angle, you can now understand, okay, I see what happened, and it gives you a hunch, it almost gives you a hunch of where to go to. Okay, now I can see where this altered, this changed, they added this, they solved for this, but they overlooked this. They made an assumption at this point. I know where to go fix the code. I know how to make the tweak to do that. And that's where it's really handy to have a properly written commit. And we need to think about the fact that I'm talking about one commit here, but the thing is this is an approach to take for all commits. So the whole idea is if we can have a consistent style, this is where the benefit of having a consistent style comes in. Instead of every commit having a totally different format, a different style, some of the commits have links, some don't, it now makes sense. Well, if I have a consistent style, if we make some amount of effort to polish commit messages before we actually commit them to the main branch, this gives us a consistent record to operate. It doesn't just become something I'm throwing over the fence just in case somebody wants to look at it in the future. No, I'm building a public record of this code. I'm building a consistent, almost like a database in a sense, of what the code has done. And it's the connection point between here's the code itself, here's the tickets where we manage it, and here's the version history. This is where I'm making the version history not only serve me by having any point that I can go back in time to, but it's also giving me the record of its evolution in a contextual sense. And so when you see that, when you realize, hey, this is where commit messages can serve me instead of me serving the commit messages, then it becomes obvious that a commit message is nowhere to put your arguments or your disagreements or throw out your feelings of, I've patched this on a weekend because the boss man told me to and I'm ticked off at it. There's no need to put all that stuff in there. Now, if you need to vent off steam, maybe you need to go spend time on Reddit and writing posts there. And that's just a joke. Don't go out to social media and vent about the boss man, okay? It's just one thing we do as I recommend the pro coders is we need to be professional. This is a job. This is a career. This is what we're doing to earn to not just earn money and a livelihood, but to make an impact. And I don't think you're making an impact to anybody if you're going to go out and rant about working a particular ticket on social media. That's why something to never put in your commit message is all these crazy war stories, if you will. It just doesn't make sense. Now, something that kind of a fringe thing that touches on all this stuff is how many commits do we need to be putting into the record? For example, I've worked on issues that, took several weeks to finish. I like to capture progress along the way in little bitty commits. And in those situations, my commit message is working, fix this, reproduce this, very short and brief, because I'm just trying to gain traction over the topics. I'm making little commits. But when it comes time to get the feedback from somebody else, to maybe be able to be ready to merge it to main, what I do is I like to take all those commits and squash them into one commit and rewrite the commit message. And that's a point to rebase against the main. I can squash all the commits and then I can rebase against the latest. So I'm integrating the latest changes into my code and I'm catching up to make sure I didn't break anything, because the main baseline could have evolved since then. That's why I'm a big fan of, maybe this is a 3-week task and it took me 15 commits to complete it. Somebody coming back after the fact to read my efforts doesn't need to go through 15 commit messages to get the point. That's where I need to spend some time, maybe a half hour, maybe a half a day, to sit there and let me squash everything down. Let me try to capture what's the big point at the top. What's some additional context that somebody's going to need to describe it, and then what's the tickets that I need to link to. And you can link to more than one ticket. Okay, this issue, here's the main issue that we resolved, but it happens to tackle 3 other issues, or it's relevant to these 3 other issues because the patch for this other issue may need to pick up this change to do something. It's where it's keen to go share this kind of stuff. And this is where it's valuable to spend some amount of time thinking from a perspective of, this isn't just what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis and throwing it into the version control system. I'm procuring a change log. I want somebody able to come back and read the record and, in a sense, be able to just sort of step back through time and see how the system evolved. There's some people that disagree and want to sit there and say, well, when you squash the commits and you rewrite it, that doesn't reflect what happened. Well, I don't think it's relevant 12 months from now that I worked on 2 commits, I took a lunch break, I worked on a 3rd commit, and then I had to go work on 2 other tasks for the next week, and then I came back to this one and added some more changes. Where's the value in that to future me 12 months from now? What's the benefit of that? I don't see a lot. To me, the benefit is taking, if this was one task, one effort, to squash it all together and kind of rewrite a more summary-based analysis of what I did, of what happened here. That's something that makes the commit log usable in the future. If I'm going to have it strewn across 15 commits, no one's going to read that, and no one's going to use this database, if you will. And I think it's a squandered opportunity that would have been perfect to take advantage of. This is why I always advocate for, have some decisive sense of what you're going to do. Have a plan for that. And that's why I think there's keen things that you need to put into your commit messages and some things that never need to be in a commit message.